David Martinez never planned on being anyone's hero. He was just a father, trying to finish another long shift at the small corner store before heading home with his little boy. The evening sun was dipping low, painting the windows in gold, when David wiped the sweat from his forehead and glanced toward the counter. There sat Tommy, his 8-year-old son, hunched over a math worksheet with the same determined frown his late mother once had. "Dad, can we get ice cream on the way home?" Tommy asked, his brown eyes bright with hope. David smiled, though tiredness weighed on his face. Money was always tight since Sarah passed, but his boy didn't ask for much. "Sure, buddy, you've been working hard, we'll make it happen." The bell above the door chimed. David looked up, expecting a regular customer. Instead, a woman in a tailored suit strode inside, her phone pressed firmly to her ear. Her voice carried across the aisles as she spoke about meetings and clients, words sharp and quick like someone who lived on schedules. Trailing behind her was a little girl with big blue eyes and a stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. She looked no older than 6. "Mommy, can we go home now?" the girl whispered. "Not now, Emma. Mommy's working," the woman replied without looking down, pacing near the front of the store. David's chest tightened at the sight. He had seen that look on his own son's face before, the longing for attention, for someone to kneel down and listen. Emma drifted toward the toy shelf, picking up a small plastic car. She held it gently for a moment before setting it back, almost like she knew better than to ask. David crouched beside her, his voice warm. "That's a good one. My son likes those too." Emma gave a shy smile. "It's nice, but Mommy doesn't like when I ask for things while she's busy." David nodded slowly, understanding more than he wished he did. He glanced at Tommy, who had paused his homework to watch them. For a brief second, the store felt calm. Just 2 kids, 2 parents, and the quiet hum of a normal Tuesday night. None of them knew that in just a few minutes, everything would change. The little store felt almost peaceful that night. The soft hum of the refrigerators filled the background. Emma wandered between the shelves with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, and Tommy's pencil scratched steadily against his notebook at the counter. David stocked a few last items, breathing in the quiet. For a moment, life felt safe and ordinary, the kind of evening he had promised his son he would always try to give him. But peace can shatter in an instant. The bell above the door rang again, sharp and hurried, and 2 men stepped inside. Their baseball caps were pulled low, their hands hidden inside their jackets. Something about the way they moved, quick, nervous, scanning every corner, made David's chest tighten. "Everybody stay where you are!" the taller man barked as he yanked a gun from his coat. The metallic click echoed through the aisles like thunder. Emma froze, the toy slipping from her fingers. Her mother finally lowered her phone, her face draining of colour. Tommy slid off his stool behind the counter, crouching low as fear took over. "Phones down, hands where we can see them," the shorter man ordered. He shoved the door shut behind him and flipped the sign to closed. His voice cracked, not with confidence, but with desperation. Behind the counter, old Mr. Miller lifted trembling hands. "Please, take what you want, just don't hurt anyone." The taller man pressed the gun toward him. "Open the register, now!" David's heartbeat thundered. His eyes darted to Tommy, wide-eyed and peeking out from behind the counter. "Just money," he told himself. "They just want money. Maybe if everyone stayed calm, this would be over quickly." But then Emma whimpered, a sound so small yet piercing. "Mommy, I'm scared." The gunman snapped his head toward her. "Shut that kid up." Victoria stepped forward instinctively, her heels clicking against the tile. "Please, she's just a child. I'll take her. Just don't—" "Quiet!" the man shouted, the gun swinging toward Emma. The little girl stood frozen, tears rolling down her cheeks, too terrified to move. And in that single moment, David didn't think of himself. He thought of his son, hiding behind the counter. He thought of the little girl who only wanted her mother's arms. He thought of Sarah, his late wife, who had once told him that courage meant stepping in even when no one else would. Before he realised what he was doing, David lunged forward. The gun exploded, the sound deafening in the small store. Pain seared across his chest as the bullet tore through him, and he collapsed to the floor. "Dad!" Tommy's scream cut through the chaos. Emma shrieked and clung to her mother as Victoria's knees buckled. The gunmen froze, panic flashing in their eyes. This wasn't what they came for. A shrill alarm began to wail. Mr. Miller's hand still pressed the silent button beneath the counter. From outside, the distant echo of sirens grew louder. "Forget it, let's go," the shorter man hissed, tugging at his partner's arm. In a frantic rush, they grabbed the bills spilling out of the register and bolted through the door, disappearing into the night before police cars turned onto the street. And just as suddenly as it had begun, the store was silent again, except for Emma's sobs, Tommy's desperate cry, and the shallow, ragged breaths of the man lying on the floor who had just saved them all. The store was heavy with silence after the men ran out, the faint echo of sirens still drifting from the streets nearby. David lay on the cold floor, his breathing ragged, blood spreading across his shirt. Tommy dropped to his knees beside him, his little hands shaking as he tried to press down on the wound. "Dad, stay with me. Please stay with me," Tommy sobbed, his voice cracking. David turned his head just enough to meet his son's tearful eyes. His lips curled into the faintest smile. "I'm right here, buddy. You're not alone." Victoria's heels clicked across the tiles as she rushed to Emma, scooping the trembling child into her arms. But her gaze snapped back to David, her polished world colliding with this man bleeding on the ground for a child who wasn't even his. She dropped to her knees beside him, pulling off her blazer without hesitation and pressing it firmly against his chest. The expensive fabric darkened instantly. "Hold on," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, just hold on. The ambulance is coming." Behind the counter, Mr. Miller clutched the store phone, his hands trembling as he spoke rapidly to the dispatcher. "We need paramedics now. A man's been shot. He's bleeding bad." Emma, still buried in her mother's embrace, reached a small hand toward David. "Thank you, mister," she cried softly. David's eyelids fluttered. He could barely find his voice, but when he did, it was steady. "My name's David," he whispered, "and that's my boy Tommy." Tommy's face was wet with tears, but he gripped his father's hand tightly. "You can't leave me, Dad. Not like Mom." Victoria's throat tightened. The pieces fell together. This man was a widower raising his son alone. A man with nothing to spare, yet he had thrown himself in front of danger for her daughter. The wail of sirens grew louder until red and blue lights flashed through the store's windows. Paramedics rushed in, kneeling beside David, their practiced hands moving quickly with bandages and oxygen. "We've got him. Stay back," one of them said firmly, though his tone carried urgency. Tommy clung to his father's hand until they gently pulled him away. Victoria held on to both children now, her own daughter and this boy who looked so lost and terrified. As they lifted David onto the stretcher, his eyes locked with hers. "Take care of your little girl," he whispered hoarsely. "That's thanks enough." Victoria's vision blurred with tears. For years she hadn't cried, not at board meetings, not even during lonely nights in her mansion. But here, in a corner store with blood on her hands, the tears came, and for the first time in a very long time, she realised she was afraid of losing more than money, more than status. She was afraid of losing a man she had only just begun to know. The ride to the hospital felt endless. Victoria sat in the back of the ambulance with Emma curled tightly against her, while Tommy held his father's hand as the paramedics worked furiously. The steady beeping of the monitor filled the space, every sound reminding them that David's life hung in the balance. When they arrived, doors flew open and the stretcher rolled inside under bright hospital lights. A nurse guided Victoria and the children toward the waiting area. Tommy tried to follow, his small legs moving fast, but another nurse gently stopped him. "Sweetheart, let the doctors help your dad. You can see him after." Tommy's face crumpled. He stood frozen in the middle of the hallway until Victoria knelt down beside him. Her expensive blouse was wrinkled, her makeup smeared, but none of that mattered now. She placed her hands on his trembling shoulders. "He's strong," she whispered. "You have to believe that." Tommy looked up, his eyes red and wet. "He already lost Mum. I can't lose him too." The words pierced through Victoria like glass. She pulled him close, surprising herself with the strength of her embrace. Emma shifted in her mother's arms, reaching to hold Tommy's hand. The two children clung to each other, silent but united in their fear. Hours passed slowly. The sterile smell of antiseptic clung to the air, interrupted only by the buzz of phones and distant footsteps. Victoria cancelled every meeting on her calendar with a few short texts to her assistant, something she had never done before. The world of business felt far away, meaningless compared to the boy sleeping restlessly on a plastic chair beside her daughter. Finally, the surgeon appeared. His scrubs were stained, his expression tired but steady. "Are you David Martinez's family?" he asked. "I'm his son," Tommy said quickly, standing up straight even though his voice wavered. Victoria rose as well. "We're friends," she added, the word catching in her throat. "How is he?" "He made it through surgery," the doctor explained. "The bullet missed his heart by inches. There was internal bleeding, but we stopped it. He'll need time, but he should recover." Tommy let out a shaky breath, relief flooding his young face. Victoria closed her eyes for a moment, whispering a thank you she hadn't spoken in years. But then the doctor's voice softened. "He won't be able to work for at least 2 months. He needs rest, no heavy lifting. Do you understand?" Tommy's relief faltered. He knew what that meant, even at his age. No work meant no rent, no groceries, no stability. His shoulders slumped as the weight of reality pressed down. Victoria watched him, something stirring inside her. For years, she had measured success in quarterly profits and endless hours at the office. But looking at Tommy, a boy fighting so hard to be brave, she realised she was standing at the edge of something far more important than any business deal. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt a pull she couldn't ignore. The pull to be present, to protect, and maybe to begin again. The hallway lights flickered softly as the nurse guided them into David's room. Machines beeped steadily in the background, the quiet rhythm of a life still holding on. David lay against the white sheets, pale and weak, but breathing. Tommy hurried to the bedside and clambered into the chair, gripping his father's hand with both of his small ones. "I'm here, Dad," he whispered, his eyes wet but determined. "I told you I wouldn't leave." David stirred, his eyelids heavy, his voice barely a rasp. "That's my boy, always strong." Emma lingered near the doorway, clutching the toy car she had carried all day. With a shy step forward, she placed it on the small table beside David's bed. "This is for you, so you don't forget me," she said softly. David's lips curved faintly. Even in pain, he managed to shift his hand, brushing his fingertips across hers in thanks. Emma retreated quickly, pressing herself against her mother's side. Victoria held her daughter close, but her attention never left the man in the bed. She felt the strange weight of gratitude pressing down on her chest, gratitude mixed with guilt. For so long she had believed that providing Emma with comfort and security was enough. Yet this man, who had almost nothing, had given her child the one thing she herself hadn't offered in years, safety in the moment it mattered most. Her blazer, once pressed and spotless, was crumpled and stained with his blood. Instead of discarding it, she folded it carefully at the foot of the bed, as if the fabric itself carried proof of what he had done. "Why?" she asked suddenly, her voice quiet but trembling. "Why would you risk everything for someone you don't even know?" David turned his head toward her, his eyes still sharp despite the exhaustion pulling at him. "Because she's just a little girl," he whispered. "No child should ever have to stand there alone staring at a gun. Someone had to step in." Victoria's throat tightened. She knelt beside her daughter, smoothing Emma's hair back, forcing herself to stay present. For once, she didn't check her phone. She didn't pace the room or think about work. She just stayed there, holding Emma with one hand, steadying the edge of David's blanket with the other. Tommy lifted his head from the bedside and glanced at Victoria. "My dad always says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, it means you do the right thing anyway." Victoria looked at the boy, then at his father, her heart swelling with a mixture of admiration and sorrow. In that moment, she didn't need to say out loud what she already knew. This man's courage had not only saved Emma's life, it had changed hers. The hospital days blurred together, each one measured by the steady hum of machines and the slow rhythm of recovery. David was improving, though still too weak to sit up for long. Tommy stayed faithfully by his side, his small body curled into the chair beside the bed each night, refusing to leave. Victoria began to come by after work, at first just to check in, but her visits grew longer. She stopped bringing her laptop, stopped stepping out for phone calls. Instead, she sat with the children at the small waiting table, helping Tommy finish math problems, or listening as Emma read aloud from a picture book. One evening, Tommy struggled over a long division problem. He pressed his pencil hard against the paper, frustration clouding his young face. "I'm no good at this without Dad," he muttered. Victoria leaned in, gently guiding his hand. "You're better than you think. Let's try it together." They worked through the numbers slowly until the solution appeared. His eyes brightened, pride flickering where doubt had been only moments before. "See?" she said softly. "You can do hard things." Emma, sitting close, slid her colouring page across the table. "You can keep this," she told Tommy. The boy smiled, tucking it carefully into his backpack as if it were treasure. Later, Victoria carried the girls' voices into David's room. She found him half awake, watching quietly as his son slept with his head resting on the edge of the bed. She laid Emma's blanket across the back of the chair, then lowered her voice. "They're keeping each other busy. You should have seen how patient Tommy was with Emma tonight." David's lips curved faintly. That sounds like him. His voice was weak but steady. He's a good brother already. Victoria lingered by the bed, surprised at how natural it felt to share these small updates with him, like two parents trading stories at the end of the day. She noticed the way his eyes softened when he spoke of Tommy, the pride that lived beneath his exhaustion. "You don't have to keep coming here," David said quietly, though his gaze lingered on the children sleeping in the corner. "You've got your own life." She shook her head, her voice firm but gentle. "This is my life. Emma is my life. And right now, this is where she belongs, where she feels safe." She glanced at Tommy, then back at him. "And maybe that matters more than anything else." For a long moment, neither spoke. The room was quiet except for the slow beeping of the monitor and the soft breaths of two children who had found comfort in each other. Victoria settled into the chair across from him, pulling her daughter's blanket over her lap. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would look like, but for the first time in years, she knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. By the end of the first week, the hospital no longer felt like a place of strangers. It had become a rhythm of routine. Mornings filled with checkups, afternoons with homework at the waiting table, and evenings when the four of them shared quiet meals from takeout boxes balanced on their laps. Victoria started bringing food that wasn't from the cafeteria. One evening she arrived carrying bags from a neighbourhood diner, the smell of burgers and fries filling the hallway. Tommy's eyes widened as she set the bags on the table. "Is that for us?" he asked, half in disbelief. "For all of us," Victoria said with a small smile. "I figured we could use a break from hospital trays." Tommy grinned and dug in, while Emma happily passed out napkins. Even David, weak but awake, managed a bite and nodded gratefully. "You didn't have to do this," he murmured. "I know," Victoria replied, "but I wanted to." As the days went on, her visits stretched longer. She helped Tommy sound out words for his reading assignment, her arm resting gently on the back of his chair as she guided him. Emma curled up beside her mother, listening quietly, and for the first time she saw her mum give her full attention without checking her phone every few minutes. Late one evening, David watched the scene from his hospital bed. His son leaning against Victoria, Emma giggling at a story, and Victoria herself looking softer, less guarded than he had ever seen her. He closed his eyes briefly, wondering if maybe, just maybe, Sarah would be glad he had met this woman. The next morning, Victoria returned with something different, a small backpack filled with puzzles, crayons and snacks. She handed it to Tommy as Emma bounced excitedly beside him. "I thought you two might need a little distraction while you're here," she said. Tommy unzipped the bag and pulled out a puzzle, his eyes lighting up. "Thank you, Miss Victoria." Emma clapped her hands. "We can all do it together." They spread the pieces across the small hospital table. For nearly an hour, the children worked side by side while Victoria and David watched. The sound of their laughter filled the room, breaking through the beeping machines and sterile air. When the puzzle was finished, Tommy looked up at David. "Dad, doesn't it feel like we're a team now?" David smiled faintly, his voice rough but warm. "Yeah, buddy, it does." Victoria glanced at him then, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, maybe? or something deeper she wasn't ready to name. And as the children proudly admired their finished puzzle, Victoria realised she hadn't felt this kind of belonging in years. Not in boardrooms, not in conference calls. Only here, in a hospital room with 2 children and a man who had nearly given his life for hers. By the 2nd week, David was finally strong enough to sit up for longer stretches. His colour had returned, though the scar across his chest was still raw and painful. The doctors assured him he would recover, but they were clear about one thing: no heavy lifting, no long hours on his feet, not for several months. Tommy listened quietly when the nurse explained this, his small hands twisting in his lap. When she left the room, he finally spoke, his voice low. "Dad, how are we going to pay for everything?" David hesitated. He had tried to shield his son from worries like that, but Tommy was too smart to be fooled. "We'll figure it out," he said gently, "we always do." But the truth pressed heavy on his chest. Rent was due soon, medical bills were piling up. And without his shifts at the store or the cleaning job at night, there was no steady income. Victoria noticed. She had seen that look before. The way someone stares at a bill they don't know how to cover. The way their shoulders sink under a weight no one else can carry. She had once thought her own pressures were unbearable, but now she realised they were nothing compared to the raw survival this man faced every day. That evening, she sat with him after the children had fallen asleep in the corner chairs. The hospital lights cast a soft glow as she spoke quietly. "I know things are hard right now. Let me help." David shook his head before she could finish. "I can't take charity." "It's not charity," she said, steady but calm. "It's what people do when they care about each other. You risked your life for Emma. The least I can do is make sure you and Tommy are okay while you heal." His jaw tightened. Pride was stitched into his bones. He had spent years proving he could raise his son alone, that he didn't need saving, but the exhaustion in his eyes betrayed him. "You don't understand," he muttered. "If I don't work, we don't eat. It's that simple." "I do understand," Victoria replied, her voice softening. "Maybe not from the same place, but I know what it's like to forget what really matters. Let me cover the hospital bills. Let me talk to a friend about part-time work you can do from home until you're strong again. This isn't pity, David. This is me trying to do right by the man who saved my daughter." He looked away, struggling between gratitude and pride. For a long moment, the only sound was the steady beep of the heart monitor. Finally, he exhaled, his voice quiet. "I don't want Tommy to think his dad gave up." Victoria leaned forward, her eyes steady on his. "Then show him that strength isn't about doing everything alone. Show him it's about letting people in when you need them." The words hung in the room like a promise. Across the room, Emma stirred in her sleep and shifted closer to Tommy. Their 2 small heads rested together on the same pillow, their breathing steady. David followed Victoria's gaze, and for the first time he let himself wonder if maybe accepting her help wasn't weakness at all. Maybe it was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. When the doctor finally cleared David to leave the hospital, relief swept over Tommy's face. But as they walked out under the pale morning light, David's steps were slow, each one reminding him of the weakness still in his chest. He hated the feeling of being fragile. He hated it more because he knew what waited beyond those hospital doors: bills, rent, and an apartment that barely held together. Victoria had already been thinking ahead. After helping them into her car, she spoke carefully. "I want to offer you something. I have a guest house on my property. It's small, just 2 bedrooms, but safe and quiet. You and Tommy could stay there while you recover. No rent, no bills, just rest." David froze. The words felt heavier than the bandages across his chest. "That's kind, but I can't accept it." Tommy looked up quickly. "Why not, Dad? It sounds perfect." "Because it's not ours," David said firmly, though his voice wavered. "I don't take handouts. Your mum and I, we always worked for what we had. I need you to understand that." Victoria kept her eyes on him, steady but gentle. "This isn't a handout. It's not charity. It's what people do when they care about each other." David shook his head, staring out the window as the city passed by. Pride was stitched into his bones, but so was exhaustion. "What happens when I can't pay you back? What kind of father would that make me?" From the back seat, Emma piped up softly. "Mr. David, If you don't stay, Tommy won't get better food, and he won't have a backyard to play in, and..." She paused, her small voice cracking. "I won't see him every day." Tommy turned towards his dad, his eyes shining with hope. "Please, Dad, just until you're strong again. I don't want you working yourself sick just to prove something." David's chest tightened, his son's words cut deeper than any pride. He glanced at Victoria, who hadn't pressed further, who simply let the children speak for her. And in her eyes, he didn't see pity. He saw sincerity, a quiet promise that this wasn't about power or charity, but about doing what was right for two kids who deserved better. After a long silence, David exhaled. "All right, but only for a while. When I'm back on my feet, we'll move out. I need Tommy to know we stand on our own." Victoria nodded, her voice warm. "Of course, temporary just until you're ready." That evening, when they stepped into the guest house, Tommy ran from room to room with a grin, amazed at the space. Emma clapped her hands when she saw the backyard swing set, tugging her mother's sleeve. "Can we play tomorrow?" David lingered at the doorway, still uneasy but overwhelmed. It wasn't wealth or luxury. It was safety. And for the first time since Sarah died, he allowed himself to breathe a little easier. The weeks passed gently, marked not by business meetings or late shifts, but by small, ordinary moments that somehow felt extraordinary. Friday evenings turned into game nights, Saturday mornings into pancake breakfasts, and quiet Sundays into long walks where the children raced ahead laughing, while David and Victoria followed at a slower pace. Still, neither of them had spoken aloud what was quietly growing between them. David convinced himself she deserved someone stronger, someone who didn't carry hospital debt and the weight of survival on his shoulders. Victoria told herself he might never see her as more than the mother of the child he had saved. It was the children who saw most clearly. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Emma brought out a drawing. She had sketched 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. She slid it across the table with a grin. "This is our family," she said proudly. "Me, Mommy, Mr. David, and Tommy." David blinked, taken off guard. Tommy leaned forward quickly, adding, "She's right, that's how it feels now." Victoria's throat tightened. She reached out and touched the paper, her eyes lingering on the simple lines that spoke a truth she hadn't dared to voice. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, David and Victoria found themselves in the kitchen, cleaning up together. The hum of the dishwasher filled the silence. Their hands brushed as they both reached for the same plate, and David hesitated, his chest tight. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. Victoria looked up, her eyes steady. "Go on." "These past months, they've been the best we've had since Sarah passed," David admitted, his voice low. "Not because of the house or the meals, but because of you. You've given Tommy something I couldn't give alone. You've given us both a piece of home." He paused, searching for words. "I think I..." Victoria set the plate down and stepped closer, her voice trembling but sure. "You think you don't have enough to offer me, but you've already given me more than I ever had. You gave me my daughter back. You showed me what it means to be present, to love, to belong." For a moment they simply stood there, the distance between them closing, not with grand gestures, but with quiet certainty. And when David finally took her hand, it felt less like a beginning and more like something that had been waiting all along. From the hallway came a muffled whisper. "I told you it would work," Emma's voice giggled. "Shh," Tommy hissed back, "they'll hear us." David and Victoria laughed softly, realising the children had been plotting all along. Months later, life found a new rhythm. David's strength returned, and with it came work that allowed him to be home in time for dinner. Victoria learned to balance her career without sacrificing evenings with Emma. Tommy and Emma grew closer, no longer just playmates, but as close as siblings. One afternoon, the 4 of them walked back into the corner store where everything had begun. A framed newspaper clipping hung behind the counter with David's picture under the headline, "Local Father Saves Child in Robbery." David glanced at it, then at Victoria beside him. She squeezed his hand gently. "Do you ever regret what happened that night?" she asked. He shook his head, his smile soft but certain. "No, because that was the night we found each other. Outside, the children skipped ahead, laughing, while David and Victoria followed hand in hand. The scar on his chest was still there, but it no longer felt like a reminder of pain. It was proof of a choice that had led them here, to a family they had built together, one ordinary day at a time. Life lesson: true strength is not about standing alone. It's about stepping in when someone needs you, and allowing others to stand with you when you can't do it all yourself. Love and courage are found in the small, everyday choices that turn strangers into family. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time and support. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you again soon, right here on Rain Inside.